You do. There we are.
It's live.
It's live. Well, and hold on, let me do this too, because I have to remember to do this because I paid for this stupid thing. So ready? Thank you very much. I paid for it, so I gotta use it. And sometimes I'll do a live stream.
Opening.
Yep. So welcome, Colleen, and thank you so much. How are you?
Great to be here. It's a good day. It was a busy week, so I'm sort of happy to be on a Saturday talking to you and not thinking about the hecticness of work.
Yeah, and you were. It took a little while to get you to nail you down here, but I appreciate your time and I appreciate what you do. And while I share this, I'm going to share this on my personal page. And when I do that, do you want to just kind of tell people who you are and
Sure.
And what you do, what you're all about?
Sure. So my name is Colleen Lynn, and I'm the founder of dogsbite.org. So it was basically the first sort of national dog bite victims advocacy nonprofit organization that began, and we started in the fall of 2007. And I had sort of thought that it was going to be a very minor, small part of my life. And it became a very big part of my life. And it's almost all of what I do now. And there's one of the key things about the site is that there's a tremendous amount of activity that goes on behind the site. So we're talking to a number of victims, helping victims who we can't expose who they are, and they could have lawsuits. So there's a lot of behind the scene things that we're doing that we can't write blog posts about, that we really can't publish about, but that we're obviously highly dedicated to doing. And sometimes people just want us on the phone for 3 hours to tell us what happened to them, and they don't want it to go any further than that. And I understand that. So we're listeners too. And they, so it's an interesting, it is an interesting space to be in. And also the space is, it doesn't matter where I go or what I do. If I have to tell someone what I do, such as I'm opening a bank account for this particular business and the name of it, everything goes quiet. What's the name of your company?
Oh, it's Byte.
Yeah. And so it always, I've had tech support, because, on tech support, sometimes they zoom in, sometimes they're looking at your screen. And so I have to make sure there's nothing, on my desktop. And once it was an Apple guy, he saw something. I had to show him some files. He was like, "What's that? What's Spotify?" And then he's like on the tech call, going to the site and talking to me about tech support. He was a pitbull advocate. He has rescued friends, and he was very interested. I'm like, I just want to call. Maybe it was vertical response. Maybe it wasn't Apple, but I think it might have been, it was vertical response. Anyway, it never fails to sort of like raise some eyebrows and, what's that,
Yeah. I do know what I started my business in 2007.
Oh, you did?
As well. And I remember checking your site out, and I used to be a huge pitbull advocate myself as well. And one of the reasons why we're talking today is I've had a ton of experiences where I've just been like, look, there's something up here, man. And I'm a big fan of data. I'm a big fan of the truth. I'm a big fan of facts, right? And I like to see patterns. And what I have found through my experience as a professional, one of the observations that I've made is people not having any idea of the high maintenance dog or high maintenance breed that they're about to bring into their home. And I've had some nightmares situations happen where luckily no fatalities, but I've had people put in the hospital. I've had many stitches that I've seen, and so that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the site, dogsbite.org. And let me show people the site too, just so they can see it here. Dogsbite.org. Is the site, and it is It is an advocate site for people that have been attacked. There's dog bite victims, right? And so I want to talk about your journey and why you've started this. And people don't realize like $300,000 to $1 million in specialized medical treatment, right? And this is no joke, man. Not only does it require specialized medical treatment, and I've been bit by a dog personally where it got so infected that they thought I was going to have to stay in the hospital and be on an IV drip for a week,
Yep.
right? And so it's something that the dog's mouth is very dirty. Dogs are animals, and some of these dogs are more prone to attack than others, and that's what I want to discuss today. So first and foremost, back in 2007, what was your catalyst for starting the website dogsbite.org?
I was attacked. So I was out jogging. At that time, I lived in Seattle, and I was on a long, slow distance run, getting ready for a half marathon. And I was on a sidewalk and just going down it. And there was a woman walking a dog in front of me. And she turned and saw me and moved over to the left side. So in between the sidewalk and the street was a green grassy knoll, right? So as a jogger, when someone does that, it usually indicates that their dog could be problematic. So as a jogger, I'm just like thankful, right? I'm like, oh, thank goodness, she's she got out of my way. And so as I'm going by, I see out of the corner of my eye that this dog has lunged forward and she's dropped the leash, and it's sort of running out in front of me. And it does this very unusual thing where it sits on the cement, sort of looking back at me. And at that point, I'm not really sure what's going on, and I sort of stop. And I am looking directly at the dog, and it's looking directly at me. And it takes off and jumps on my chest, and I fall back onto the cement. And it basically, bit the first thing that it could, which fortunately for me was my forearm, because I was able to put that in front of my face. So I think that he shook it so hard. I didn't know that was possible. And then that dog let go, and I was able to sprint out of there. And that sort of started the whole process. And I was, in the hospital for a couple of days. It was shattered. My ulna was shattered. So got the metal plate, and when I got out, I started researching this issue online. Like, are pit bulls dangerous? And I thought that they were. I thought that everybody knew that they were. That there was a hesitancy, right? If you really wanted one, you could have one. But I had been a dog owner too, and it just wasn't. I
should have warned people, but there's a picture of your arm. There's a picture of your arm, right? That, and this is after surgery, right?
Post surgery, yes.
That's gnarly.
Yeah, it's gnarly. Well, and part of what you're seeing too is they had to slice that open to put the metal plate in. But it was a serious bite, and it didn't last very long. I mean, I think that's what really got me too, is that you could never know exactly how long these things last, but victims have a tendency to make it longer because there's all these chemicals in your head that sort of act to make it feel like things are slowing down.
Yep.
But I still think that was no more than 5 seconds. I really, I've never been called on it. So, it was one of those things where she was, that dog had a leash. And so she had a little more going for her than maybe an unleashed, trying to get an unleashed dog off someone, right? So she was pulling and screaming, and I was screaming, and just like, okay, it was done. It was done with this bite.
Well, you had a surgeon there that actually was able to assess it, since you were by Harborview. I remember we spoke on the phone earlier about this. So you're one of the lucky ones, man. And not only that, but it was one dog, not multiple dogs, where I've seen so many of these attacks happen, where it is multiple dogs, and the dogs are pack animals, right? And so they have kind of a mob mentality where they will fuel that fire if multiple are attacking, and we need to, we need to realize this as people, that's dog lovers, right? And not only that, but if you can't control your dog, then that dog has no business being out in the public, in my opinion. And I see this incident happening way too often. And so what did you do? I mean, you worked in tech,
Yeah.
right? You were a website designer, and so you kind of fell naturally into, like, did you go look to see if there was more stories about what happened to you? Were you looking? I mean, this is a traumatic event, being attacked by a dog. Trauma needs to be dealt with. We can't just hold on to it and expect it to go away. This stuff needs to be processed
Yes.
properly in a healthy way for us to heal in a manner that we can move on with our lives. And so
That's
was
hard to do. I mean, I had a therapist in the past. So it's funny because about a week or two after the attack, I'm out of the hospital. My mom's visiting, and she just says something, and I'm like, oh, I should hire an attorney. and also while she was there, I was like, oh, I should call my therapist. And both of these were great calls because I called my therapist. I was like, I was attacked by this dog. He said, why don't you come in tomorrow? And I contact the attorney. I mean, literally, I'll be there tomorrow. I mean, Washington State's a strict liability state. I was on a public space. She dropped the leash. So, I mean, obviously, it's a great case, assuming that this person had coverage. So I was lucid and researching when I got out of the hospital, but it was a little bit delayed. It just struck me like I should really do these things. And if I hadn't, particularly, a therapist was really important because there's not many people who understand what this means and how everyone's PTSD and trauma is going to be different, right?
Yeah.
And I think I experienced some very normal things, such as we call it loosely the shrinking world. We don't want to go out anymore because there's dogs everywhere, and so you shrink and you shrink and you shrink, and it doesn't all happen at once. And then you sort of have to then be able to branch out again, right? And that's sort of where I needed a little help with that. And so I just know that one of the first things I do when I talk to people who have been attacked or their children have been is to, however they can manage to get some type of therapeutic help, it will really, and the parents too, because the parents are often, even if they're not harmed, they're so traumatized by seeing their child harmed, or they feel guilty, maybe they couldn't stop it. So the whole family needs to talk to a professional to help them.
Well, and it's also, the people don't realize, and I tell my colleagues, like, you realize that there's dog bite attorneys, right? Like, there's people that specialize in dog bite lawsuits, and look at all this. This is just here locally, but look at this. Dog bite cases often settle between 10,000 and 100,000, be higher or lower, depending on case factors. Each dog bite claim is unique. And I've had personal experience with a dog bite claim that was $600,000. Yep. And I've had one that was $40,000 from a colleague. And so as colleagues and as people that are taking on these dangerous dogs and bringing them into our house, it would be stupid of us to not consider the liability that we share. And even with Snohomish County, where I live, to have a kennel license, we need to have $1 million minimum liability insurance, right? And so that's something important. Like, if you have a business and you're working with dogs, this is always a factor to be considered, and you need to have liability insurance, and know that this happens more often than you think, and people really get settlements from this. It's something that is pretty cut and dry.
Right.
And even if you watch Judge Judy, which I do, and I wouldn't watch, even though dogs are viewed as property, right? But when you injure somebody, especially in the public domain,
yes,
and we are all, it reminds me of I had a client, and they were so mad that people kept walking by her house. And I was like, that's a public street. That, they're like, well, screw them for walking by and standing right there and making my dog go crazy.
Oh,
And I'm just like, goodness, that's a public street. That person can stand there all they want. That's
yeah,
public, right? And so we need to realize that, and sometimes people might provoke an incident, or might provoke an attack by being a little bit, how to say, like, stupid or
yes,
intimidating or whatever, without realizing it,
right.
right? And so people just don't know what they don't know sometimes. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm talking to you today, Colleen, is just to kind of educate my colleagues as well on the liabilities that they're embarking in by taking on some of these dangerous breeds. And anytime I have an aggressive dog or aggressive case, I have multiple protocols
Right.
and multiple layers of those protocols to ensure that this dog does not get out and that this dog is managed very well. And same thing too, because Washington is a liability state. When I'm working with clients here, especially with aggressive or bite history, that's a totally different legal framework and contract that I have with that client. And as my colleagues, I need you to realize that that's what needs to happen, because now you're involved with this. And
Mhm.
so if you're in the training circle and this dog is aggressive, and after you've worked with this animal, they can just go right up the line, sue him, sue you, sue whoever owned the dog previously,
Mhm.
and it's going to settle. I mean, it's you're going to get something. That they have many different tools in the legal world that they can use to make sure that this person is compensated as well as they should be, because of, as we were speaking about earlier, the trauma that this inflicts, and it's a lifelong struggle for a lot of people.
It certainly can be. I mean, attacks to the face too. I just, it's extraordinary. Disfigurement at all, but disfigurement to the face is very intense.
Yeah, of course. And guess what? They get to live with that for the rest of their lives.
Right.
Right. And people don't realize that dogs bite in the face and the neck, sometimes up to 70 times, or excuse me, 70%.
For children. Right.
For children, that's right. 70% are in the neck and the face area,
Yeah.
because that's naturally where the dog would go to correct a puppy, right?
Right. Oh, I
And
see. Oh, that's interesting. Most of the time, when you read these studies, they're talking about the height of the child and the height of the dog. But you're right. I didn't think about that.
yeah, they're going to correct, but it's also the height of the dog, height of the child.
Mhm.
And so, and it's just something that we need to consider as professionals, and we need to be advocates, not just for these dogs, but also to look at it through a truthful,
Yeah.
a truthful lens, right? And so, as a researcher in this field, what are some of the things that you encountered when starting this, and what has your journey been like so far?
Well, definitely, I knew that it was going to be controversial. I had been sort of online looking at, we call them mauling threads. So when there's an attack and all of these people are commenting and attacking each other, and their belief systems are clashing. So I knew that there was going to be controversy. I didn't know how much controversy there might be. So that was sort of shocking to me. And I think it was, so if I started in October, or around January of the next year, I just, I had to make a decision. Was I going to do this or not? Because it had been really just upheaval after upheaval for a couple of months. And I decided that, I did make the decision that I would go ahead, because I was so upset with the harassment and the venom and all of this directed. I was like, this is the reason why there is no website here today, right? Or before my time, there was no place for me to go.
Right. And so, I mean, and you,
so high.
And I guess that was another question I wanted to ask, is like, where did you, besides the therapy and besides the attorney, and there was nothing, right? There was no websites, there was no advocacy for dog bite victims
No.
before dogsbite.org. Interesting.
No. And so, and I was in a unique position because I know HTML and CSS, and I made websites. In 2007, there were much fewer tools to create a website than there are today. An advocacy group could get started today a lot faster than, say, back in my time, or they would need they needed a higher skill set. So I definitely felt like I should do that, and I did. There's one story that I have that's brief, but it was about 6 weeks after the attack, and I had just started driving again as a stick shift, and I was behind this school bus, and I hadn't realized, but it didn't stop at a street corner. It stopped in the middle, and I thought, when did school buses start stopping? Not at corners. And I didn't understand it, and it was taking a long time. It's very narrow there. There was nothing you can do when you're behind a school bus, right?
Right.
And so I'm like just sitting there, and these kids, like they're around like 6 years old, something like that, are piling off. And I'm looking at them, and I realize where they're standing. And they're standing where I was attacked. And it all happened at once. So there've been like no tears, no huge breakdowns. And that was the moment when it all broke down, because I thought, my God, it could have been them. I mean, and that is a fundamental feeling, a universal feeling that all victims have, when you see how it could have been someone much more vulnerable than yourself. That's a hard thing that kicks in, and I think that moment of seeing those kids solidified, I'm starting this website. I'm getting it, because I can't stand that it could have been them. I just can't stand it,
Yeah. Well, and it's to me, it's crazy when you hear and see some of the objections that people have for holding people accountable, right? And I hear it too, right? I hear about wonderful dogs and the notion that some of these dogs were called nanny dogs, right? And we talk about that, and it's not all and I agree. Like there are some good pit bulls out there. There are some good bully breeds out there, and I'm not. And I just did a Zoom meeting, and I was talking about this. I was telling people about bringing you on in my Patreon. Ooh, just so you guys know, whenever I mention Patreon, I'm going to put a link to my Patreon page. And if you like this stuff, join me on Patreon. But I do a Zoom meeting with dog trainers, and we talk about different things. And I was giving them a little preemptive notification about having you on. And one of the comments that somebody said is like, the good ones are so good, but the bad ones are so bad.
There you go. I mean, I think that is a feeling that our statement that I have read before. That's a hard thing to live with. What do you do about it?
Well, and I've met some of the good ones, and I've met some of the bad ones. Mm-hmm. And the thing is that we also have kind of a philosophy in the animal world now that we do not behaviorally euthanize these dogs, where I think absolutely they need to be euthanized. They need to meet Jesus. And there's a way that we can do it that is very humane.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that we need to utilize that. These no-kill shelters are a problem with this, and the inability to euthanize and to properly temperament test a dog that is dangerous.
That's right.
And to be able to handle it in a way, and I get it doesn't feel good,
right?
But doing what's right doesn't always feel good, right? No. And so, I am an advocate. I am an advocate for kill shelters. I am an advocate for dogs that need to be euthanized. And I wasn't like this before. Before I met some of these dogs, I was like, look, I've worked with them, and we have a comment here. Life is too short to own a dangerous dog. Damn right, Jackie.
It really is. It really is.
And I have to remind some of my clients too, like this isn't what you signed up for when you got this dog, right?
Right.
And
right.
And then, yeah, see, look, isn't it? I'm sorry to hear about your story, Colleen. And then here we got a comment that this is one of the misnomers, Amy. Isn't any canine good or bad dealing on their owner? No, some canines are bad, even with the best owner. Some of them have just a bad temperament. They're challenging. They could be loved. They can be, all that stuff. It's not always the owner.
Right.
Sometimes it is the particular animal, and some of these problems cannot be fixed. And so that is one of the misnomers that I hear a lot, right? Okay, absolutely. And as a professional, I share my observations. And I wasn't like this at the beginning, Colleen. I was like the pie in the sky idea of like, oh, they can all be saved. It's not the deed, or it's not the breed, it's the deed, or whatever it is. But now I'm like, look, no, there are particular dogs, and I hate to sound brass or heartless, that belong in the ground, that belong euthanized. And I've gotten better at telling people to do this, because we have the means to do it in an effective way. And we have such a large population of rescue dogs. There are so many dogs that don't exhibit these behaviors, that can take that spot of a dog that is being managed and taking up resources, taking up time, and is still a dangerous dog. And so, we need to not fool ourselves, and to be to be ignorant, ignore ant. We have to address this problem. And when you and I were talking, Colleen, we were talking about 20 years ago. This wasn't a problem that we see kind of today.
No, I mean, we see that with the no-kill shelters. We know that the problem is so bad that I don't know if you're aware that 2 states have passed mandatory bite disclosure laws.
Okay, I did not know. Bite disclosure laws, and that's one of the things that you advocate.
Every releasing agency must, so that would be any private humane group, any public shelter. So any animal releasing agency has to supply a bite record. And I will never forget when the first law passed in Virginia, and that was because a woman got a pit bull that had been adopted to her that day, and it killed her mother within hours. The woman had lied. The owner, the person who sold her had lied about the dog's behavior. But when they're sitting in these chambers talking, I'm getting some texts back from people, and like one of the legislators says, well, don't they disclose that information already? And we're like, no. So, it isn't even just that there's bad behavior that's not really fixable to, ordinary owners, is that they will, lie about their behavior too, and withhold bite information. Now, you're not going to be able to withhold it from someone like me, in the sense of, if I was going to a shelter, I would send a FOIA. I would get every single behavior record, because I can get it. You can't say no. But if you sort of walk in and you're not prepared to go that far, you might not get all the information, the bite history that you need. So I think that it speaks volume. The other state was California. It speaks volume that we've got 2 states. I wish a lot more to place some more responsibility onto these releasing agencies. And then on top of that, as you have talked about, the temperament testing has really gone to the wayside, and that is also a no-kill issue. They stopped the resource guarding, the food bowl in a lot of places. They're just taking little pieces of tests and then putting them together to make their own little temperament test. And so that becomes its own. It's not standardized, So it's you're taking a risk.
Well, we take risks too as dog trainers. I've come into so many different situations where they try to sugarcoat what's going on here. And I've walked out of rooms and stuff like that because they did not fully disclose the danger that I was walking into. And I was pissed off, honestly, because I had a dog come up to me and snap right here, man, like right by my face. And I was there to deal with them pulling on a leash or something like that. Right. And it was like, no, this is a totally different case. I'm out of here. Pay me, because you're still paying me for my time, but I'm done right now. You were not honest with me with what the behavior this dog is exhibiting. This is a degree of difficulty and a degree of danger that is far more compensated than what you're paying. That is going to be far more I'm going to be far more compensated for taking the risk of this
Right.
than what I'm charging now. And I was done. And we see that a lot as professionals, that people will not disclose the severity of their dog's behavior, instances of dog bites, of a dog attacks, dog fighting with other dogs, all that stuff.
Right. Definitely
Right.
the dog on dog fighting. Yeah, I think that's withheld a lot.
And I get it because I don't get it actually. Like, I get it because they don't want to see the problem for what it is in one aspect. Maybe they have a budget. They don't want to, they save money as much as they can. I don't know. But you're putting me in danger. You're putting yourself in a liability as well. And as a professional, we don't have magic wands.
Right.
Like, we have to know the truth about what's going on so we can make the changes that are necessary to fix this problem.
That's right. I mean, it's one thing. I mean, to not tell your trainer, it seems like maybe they're fearful of it just being a reflection of them.
That too. I didn't forget about that.
You know, they failed as a dog owner, and they don't want to let you know what you're really walking into, and that is a scary space to be in.
Well, and I remember on Reddit, and there's also a banned pit bull group. There's a pit bull lover group. There's all these groups, but there's also, I remember seeing this thread on Reddit about somebody being shamed for seeking training for their dog.
Shame for seeking training?
Right, because it's basically, how can you not bond with this animal? You're supposed to be able to bond with them. And then not only that, but the people that actually do training with them, they're shamed for being too hard on the animal at home, like by having boundaries, having a routine, having structure, and then they're shamed for that as well by family members. And to me, it's so backwards, but I had no clue. Just like what your response there, like, they're being shamed. Like, I've read through all these threads, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is a thing.
Yeah.
This is a thing that it's like supposed to be intuitive. This relationship, it's esoteric with you and your animal, and to seek out the professional's help is going to jeopardize that in some way. I don't get it, because I am a professional, and I've worked with many different professionals, and I get input, and I work with people that need help, but it also gets to the degree of they need help. Right. And so I'm very, very rarely working with people that it's like push button, easy dog. We're working with a problem. I've been sent to houses with dog attacks on kids from the state to deem it, like, there was a divorce case in particular that I'm thinking about. Luckily, the dog was okay. And I signed off and wrote a letter to the judge and let her know, hey, look, we've done training, that they know the protocols that need to happen. I've spoken with the child as well. And I feel comfortable with this dog existing in this house, right? The dad wanted to euthanize the dog. The dog actually lived to be a old age and was fine with some good, solid training, right? But it took a degree of, like, a court order for them to really seek out the advice of a professional. And
wow, that's a really high threshold.
It is. Where it should be pretty commonplace, I would hope, for people to have help with an animal, especially before we're putting out a fire, because a lot of times we're in an uphill battle as a trainer, dealing with some of this behavior, and some of it's just heartbreaking, because these people have bonded with this animal, and they've had this dog for 8 or 9 years, and especially some of these bully breeds, I've seen, like, that nothing happened, nothing at all, and then all of a sudden they went after the kid, or right. And I'm like, this is uncanny, and this is not usual, and I've seen it too many times to realize that there's something here, right? There's something within, and I thought maybe it's like some type of senility or some type of degradation of the cognitive function of that animal. I don't know. I don't know, but and we have a question here. What is the problem? How many dogs bite before they are euthanized? I mean, do you have
How many dogs? You mean how many?
so
How
what
many
is the
dogs
problem?
that bite are euthanized?
How many dogs bite before they are euthanized? I don't know the numbers there, but what it is she has Colleen has a website where she documents dog bite cases. And we see a pattern emerging with these cases and its particular breeds that are happening. What is a percentage of pit bull fatalities of any other dog?
It is up through, I'm looking at my chart, it's about 67% from 2005 to 2019. So it's a high percentage, but we've known that. That was true during the CDC study years too. It wasn't 67%, but I think the combination of pit bulls and Rottweilers were about 55%. So those two dog breeds did not make up 50% of the population.
Yeah.
So it was disproportionate then, and that's when the pit bull population was estimated to be about 1 million back then. And today, or let's say less than 1% of the total dog population. Today, it's running between 6 and 8%. Those are numbers that we get from a different nonprofit that looks into the breed population numbers, I think in and around July of every year. So it's growing, the population of bullies.
My grandpa and dad used to tell me as a child, the dogs who continuously kill neighbors' lambs, he went to a farm or he swallowed a lead pill after attack after attack. And that's the way, like even out here in the country, I live in the country, and I have people that if your dog's on their property, they're dead. They're shooting that dog. If not, then we have livestock guardian dogs here. And I've done interviews with Jason Kessler, who's a dear friend, that these dogs will kill your dog. Right. If not, then the owner of the farm will. I've had another pit bull incident where these two pit bulls, and the guy had no clue where these dogs came from, but it killed 4 of his adult goats.
Oh.
And he ended up shooting those dogs, and rightfully so. Right. And so and that's what we call livestock. This is a livelihood for these people. And to think that your dog is just going to get out and be okay out here in the country is you're in for a very rude awakening.
Yes, I think that is an interesting component. Most of these owners aren't going to understand the livestock laws, which have been on the books for eons. That just no matter where you go, a farmer can shoot a dog that's even worrying. They don't have to be attacking their animals; they can just be out there chasing them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And on their property. And that's the difference between being in public and being on somebody's property, being on somebody's private land. Right. And that's why we have to keep our wits about us, but also be in control of our animals when we're on property that doesn't belong to us. It belongs to everybody. And that's a lot of people, especially in the cities. They don't have that big of a property. They don't have, and these dogs are getting out over and over again. And then we have gun laws in the cities as well. That's not the same as the country laws.
Totally different.
Totally different. Yeah. And so, thank you, Amy, for letting us know that. And so, you started and you got the fuel of the fire of people, the salacious attacks that you got, right? And then you were driving and you saw those kids and you were like, holy shit, those can be one of those kids.
Yep.
And then that was the catalyst of, you know what? I'm doing this.
Yeah.
And and that's 15, was it 15 years ago?
15 years in October.
15 years, yeah. and you've been doing this quite a while now, and it's pretty much taken up it's like a full-time gig for you now.
Almost. I mean, I'm doing sort of surprisingly some contract work right now, but usually it's generally speaking, it's almost become full-time. Now, COVID got a little bit strange because I didn't really have, people weren't really doing websites, and so clients were off busy everybody was taking care of themselves during COVID, right? And trying to manage their own business. And so I just sort of started a new routine where I was just really only doing Dogs Bite. And then And then, yeah, I just, sometimes I just want to, I released sort of a new underlying code for the site. I think in July it was. And so I spent like 4 months on that. And sometimes I just want to do more technical work and sort of, it's hard to sort of constantly be recording the attacks and doing the victim's work. And it's tough, so I just sort of taking a little break from that and thinking about other types of problems that aren't so hard. I can fix code. It's kind of hard to fix this problem.
Well, and it's also, these are life-altering attacks, and how many of these are personal family dogs that they know?
Right.
And a lot of them are, right? A lot of them are, and people don't realize, and they don't understand. And anytime that I see pictures of dogs with kids and the dog or the kids jumping on the dog or something like that, I'm like, oh man, this is not cute. We need to be advocates for our dogs, but we also need to realize the body language that dogs have. We also need to realize that dogs are dogs, they're animals, right? And so it's something that I've traded my life to help educate people, but I also realize that a lot of people really, just like we were saying with the shaming the trainer or shaming the people that seek out training, they really don't want help, or they really, I don't know how to explain it. Like they don't want guidance. They don't want, or they think they know and they misattribute behavior.
That's right. That gets back to your sort of your level 1 dog owners, that they think they know, and they're not in a position to know, but they're in the position to think that they do, and that's really that's when you do want a professional to help you.
Well, and it's also what I tell people. People do when the number one mistake that dog owners make is by anthropomorphizing the dog or make it human characteristics on that animal. And I have to let them know, like, this is not the case. And there's also a misnomer, especially with some of these dogs. And I want to show this real quick, that these dogs had jobs that they never ever had. And it reminds me of this one here. The nanny dogs, right? Misunderstood nanny dogs. And you wrote a review of his book, right? Of Thomas Beasley. And it basically says, what does it say? And what do you hear about nanny dogs?
Well, this is an old standing thing. Now there is the nanny dog, I think Truth About Pit Bulls. A researcher did a deep dive into this and found absolutely no evidence that this was ever the case. There was I think in the 1970s, there was a Staffordshire breeder, and that made a reference to, it wasn't even nanny, it was something else, a different type of word. But I think that it got spun out of control into this idea of nanny dog. So the fact that it cannot be traced anywhere means it's not true. And it's all part of the dog fighting culture too. It would, it fight on Sundays, and it was a nanny dog during the week, the baby in the pram, just guarding the baby in the pram. So just all of these, basically they're nonsense. They don't make any sense that a dog could be babysitting kids.
Yeah, I heard it from Little Rascals.
Oh, yeah, and there's
the Little Rascals. It says, I gladly and somberly dedicate the book to all victims of violent dog attacks and their loved ones, that they've had to endure the agony and trauma of such horrible, tragic event. To all those who stand up for them despite never-ending hate and derision. And this is it. So I'll put up a link, you guys, to Thomas Beasley's book in the comment section below. But that is something that is a misnomer, and something that I've heard many times before, is that, oh, it's a nanny dog. Oh, it's this. And I've also seen these dogs being passed off as emotional support animals or service dogs. And I mean, there was one, and I see it here. It's basically, it was a Delta case where the guy got attacked.
Oh, yes.
By
airlines?
Yep.
Yeah. So that was huge. I mean, they eventually through, about a 2-year process, I think it was, they eventually got, the FAA to basically say that, the Airlines Carrier Act to basically say that airlines now have a choice. They do not have to accept ESAs at all. So only service dogs. And I think that they moved it's a really strange thing because in the air, if it was called a service or ESA, they were classified sort of the same. And so what they did was the psychiatric service dogs were classified similarly as the ESAs. It's a little bit complicated, but so the PSAs, psychiatric service dogs, became actual service dogs. Those are legal now. And then the only thing that they can disallow, airlines can disallow, is are ESAs. And so, the difference being one can perform a work for a disability and the other one is not trained to perform that task.
Well, and this is the other thing too, a lab mix. Anytime I hear that as a trainer, anytime I hear that as a trainer, and do you know what I tell people? I'm like, look, don't pull that shit with me. That works for, whatever, anybody else, but I know what dog this is, and a lot of times they want to get into or kind of focus on that aspect. And I always say, what's it mixed with?
Right.
What's the lab mix? Like you're leaving out a big open end here. Like I want to know lab mix with what, right? And so, and this people don't realize too, one person has affected the whole industry.
That's right. And this was a very specific type of attack. It was a repeated attack. It wasn't just once. So they pulled it off and he went back, pulled it off and went back. And this was a different type of bite than what we might see from, say, another breed. So that was definitely something to, I think we did like 5 reports on the whole Department of Transportation, starting with that big giant post on the attack in Delta. Just follow that through for like a 2-year period until all that stuff finally got finalized in the final rule. But yeah, there was a lot of talk about that particular dog, and
in the face too. It was covered in face. I need help. There's a medical emergency. Yeah, he was
he was pinned to the window chair. So there was no place for this victim to go. It was so horrifying, and his dog was sitting on his lap.
28 stitches. Lasted 30 seconds. The attack reported lasted 30 seconds, resulted in profuse bleeding, severe lacerations. They had to replace the airline seats.
That's right.
And now everybody has to bring a psychiatric evaluation.
Yes.
With them, right? A Delta requires documentation, not more than 1 year old, on letterhead from either a licensed medical or mental health professional. Title, address, license number of the phone number, and the signature of the mental health professional.
That's right.
As a mental health related disability recognized by a diagnostic DSM, right? The passenger needs the emotional support of psychiatric service animal as an accommodation. And that person listed on the letter under the care of the assistant physician. So yeah, it's got it.
And sign. It's to defray the fakers, right? So many people trying to get their pets to fly free, or so many people just claiming it's an ESA, and those were really interesting times in the rulemaking because everyone has submitted all this information. So some people are submitting studies about ESAs and what are they and who can really assign them out to people. And then there's the dog groups, and then there's the disability groups. And so it's some fascinating conversations going back and forth there. And I think what really turned the corner was that the disability guide dog people were upset that there were so many fakers, that these dogs were threatening their very well-trained dogs. And that was upsetting to them. And so that diminished their dog's ability to do their work because these were untrained dogs running around and biting and doing all kinds of stuff.
Well, it takes a year minimum for these service dogs, and we're looking at $40,000 plus for that animal, right? And that's because I've worked with them and I've trained them, and I've worked with canine companions for independence, and there is zero standards of behavioral expectations for an ESA, an emotional support animal, where service dogs are very regimented with their what the standards we look for, and how we train these dogs up, and then also the degradation of the training and how we do the upkeep as well. Like, I'll visit people with the service dogs, and the service dog is a medical device.
Yes, it is.
Right, and the ESA is. I mean, I get it. There's people with trauma. There's people that, are definitely soothed by having that companion with them. I'm actually one of them. I love having my dogs with me, and I travel with them, but they're not an ESA.
Right. I mean, every pet dog is an emotional support animal. The difference is that you have to have a disability to claim an ESA.
Yeah, like agoraphobia, and I get that stuff. Like, but we also have to have standards with those ESAs too, because guess what? Your dog is acting up and they're doing. You're going to experience the antithesis of what you want when you're out in the world. People are going to be drawn to you. They're going to be confronting you. They're going to be asking, right? And so, in the jurisdiction of FAA, it's like it was so crazy that. I've received an ESA document. She's a Brittany Spaniel. It doesn't matter. I mean, she's a Brittany Spaniel, not Staffordshire Terrier. Okay. Well, as long as you use it and have that dog being, as long as you have a legitimate reason to have this dog. But the way I was told is like the city jurisdiction and then the airport jurisdiction are two different things, and then the air jurisdiction is a different thing as well. So it works.
Correct. And some airlines, I don't know if I want to say American, but not all airlines banned ESAs. And Delta did, but there are some that do accept. So it's even depending upon which airline you're flying, whether or not you can have an ESA on board or not. And I know people don't want to put their dogs underneath. That freaks them out. Although we used to do that sort of before. And then also I think that, the airlines really crack down on the little toy brachial breeds too. They don't want them flying. It's a danger. And so, those are,
brachiocephalic, the ones with the smush faces, smush noses, because the pressure up there does something that they've had a couple pass away in flight, and underneath. And then they had one incident where the lady had her put the dog up in the freaking luggage case, and the dog passed away, and that was so sad.
Oh, so it was a French bulldog, I think it was. It was so the nation flipped, the internet broke.
Yeah, I remember that. That was sad.
Yeah, it was definitely.
But the dog was losing its mind too, right? And I've been on flights as a professional, and before the ESA regiment crackdown started to take effect, where we've had dogs that were nuisances on those flights and barking their heads off and just being out of hand, and people need to be held responsible for that. In fact, people have been sued, or the airlines have been sued for babies crying and stuff like that. And
I didn't think about that.
Yeah, and I think that it's something, because everybody's paid to be there. It's a form of kind of a collective thing, and we have to consider the way that our dogs act, and they have to be very well mannered.
Yes, they do.
Are there during this time, and we're speaking about that French bulldog, that story, are there any other stories that really stand out to you doing this work?
I think that, there's always big cases that haunt me, right? In trends that I see. And I know that during COVID, we opened up. So we're collecting about 33 parameters now. We now collect more. And one of them are sort of habitual and deviant behaviors, whether it's the victim or the owner. So we really wanted to make it broad to see what was going on there. And we're getting to about 34 to 44% of all fatalities have that factor. And that it's just, there's a lot of disadvantage scenarios already. And then you pile on some dangerous dogs on top of that. And sometimes you just wonder, it's hard to see people that down and out, and to see their criminal backgrounds. So that's hard. I think it's hard when, like I said, sometimes someone will just call and want to talk. And there was this one woman who called and she just wanted to tell me her story. And, she basically, it's one of the most horrifying and chilling attacks I've ever heard. And she essentially sacrificed her arm. She tried to lock herself in a bathroom. She barricaded herself to get away because she had already been attacked in the living room. And she said that she couldn't keep the dog out and close the door all the way. And so the dog already had her right arm. And so she just left it there. She said, I am going to save myself and I'm going to sacrifice my right arm. And that's what she did. And so she sort of just slid down to the ground and the dog ate her arm, just tore it up, amputated. She had been about a year since the attack, and she was obviously out of the hospital, done with therapy for what could be done, right? There wasn't any more therapy work to do. And then she was just at a total loss. She didn't know who to talk to or what her family knew, but they were tired of hearing about it. I mean, and this is going to be the rest of her life. So she was probably in her 50s, and I just felt so, I would love to have her on a show and tell her story because it's chilling, but it's things like that haunt, and then there's just different cases. I think one of the cases that really got me going is of subject matter today because of the XL bullies. It was the first XL bully case, and you might be familiar with it. It was in 2014. It was in Louisiana. And that was a gigantic dog, 130 pounds, that police shot it 12 times to kill it. That particular breeder, so it was like this awakening. What is this 130-pound dog that he's calling a pit bull? What is this? And that particular breeder had just hundreds and hundreds of photos of his dog and his Instagram. So we're going, oh my God, that's a lot of material. And we're looking at it. And then the breeding community reacts because they're saying, hey, this dog's sire has produced multiple offspring that have violently attacked people. What's going on? Why do you keep breeding this dog? So there's all this, the learning curve was high, right? And learning about the XL bully breeders, the XL bully community, and the horror of what happened in that attack. And just, 1 minute, the mother and daughter and the giant dog named Nico were watching TV, and the next moment it was attacking the girl. And just the police that were so, you could see them in the press conference. They're totally they've never seen a dog like that before. And they're terrified. And the mother grabbed the child and I guess handed her out the window to someone because none of the first responders could come inside the house. Just complete and utter chaos. And so that one is definitely a hard one to forget.
Is it Kimbo? Is that the dog?
Kimbo, yeah. You can
wait, the breeder's sired and 100 pound or who killed a 4-year-old.
Yeah.
Says his animal is being very wrongly blamed. That's the other aspect of this is look, it's not. It's they don't think these animals can do any wrong, right? And that's where we need to shine the light of reality and be like, no, this is an animal and it's possible. I mean, that's just basically what this is. 2014, April 9th, 130-pound dog. Dang. Here, I'll show you guys here the screen.
But I mean, when you get a look at this dog and also his sire, Kimbo, I mean, it's pretty intense. I mean, it's hard not to feel there are humane issues going on here, just looking at the animals. And so that's another thing. I mean, if I'm looking at dogs that can breathe well, can walk well, and everything, I'm not feeling like, there's a humane issue there. But when I see them, sweating and they can't, they can't walk well because of how they're formed. I mean, it's harder, to do the research that I need to do sometimes. And as you know, I mean, these are the XL, so they've got the exotics that are really small and like their legs are really short to the ground, and it's all an accessory sort of phenomenon. And I have problems. I don't like to see anything inhumane. I don't like to see that.
I've worked with them, and there's this one breeder called Toadies.
Oh yes, yeah.
TOD, and this is basically they're so here. I got to show it because
you got to see it to believe it.
Look at these dogs.
Yeah.
Right. Look at this splayed out. These dogs are going to they're deformed. Whoops, not this one here. Let me see. But this is.
Yeah.
When I start look at the back here.
Exactly. I know. And you can imagine some of the XLs have some of these problems. They're just huge, right? And so.
Well, and anything that's going on the outside, there's going to be an effect on the inside as well, having to do even with cognitive ability. And when we see people that are developmentally delayed or obviously,
right,
then we're going to have learning disabilities. We're going to have behavioral issues sometimes with these. And same thing is the same thing with these dogs, man. And I just can't believe it, And the other thing is culling dogs with behaviors that are not. That's a kaji. Those dogs are functionally useless. Absolutely. And look at Surrender has a champion dog. Look at that dog. And we were talking on our Patreon Zoom about his dog and the lineage that it has and the training that he does with this dog. But he also doesn't fool himself that this is a powerful breed and that he definitely can't overwhelm himself with so many of these dogs. The selective culling that needs to happen. It used to happen a long time ago. As soon as these dogs would exhibit this type of characteristic, they would be euthanized. Yeah. And it's doesn't feel good to talk about. It doesn't feel good to say, but it's the truth too. Is you're not putting out dangerous dogs into the world, and most of these dogs, people don't realize what goes into breeding good dogs. And
right, they don't realize that. I mean, I think that's interesting because, well, first off, some of the reasons why they don't put them down are their own personal selfish reasons. Some of these dogs they're not happy animals. I want to place a human emotion on them, but it's frustrating, and if you can't ever take it to a dog park, you can't take it outside, and these social animals, or you have it locked up someplace. I mean, that isn't a life, a nice lifestyle either, right? So, I think that there's a lot of selfish reasons to keep them alive so that you don't feel bad for humane euthanasia. And I feel like that is a real lack of leadership in the humane industry to say, never put it down. It doesn't matter. You could never take it doesn't matter. There's got these behavior problems. I think that there is humane euthanasia for a reason.
Yeah.
Right? And that is what it is. Now you were going to go on another topic, so go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Well, I think that people need to step up to the plate. And if you're going to breed these dogs, it's not for the faint of heart, is what I'm saying. And not only that, but there's also medical issues that arise with some of these dogs that later on in life. And guess what? You're liable for those. And people don't do that. And it's like an out of sight, out of mind type of existence.
Right.
And we just had a dog that I returned back to a breeder today from a client. Right. And so some of these dogs might come back to you if they don't work out in your situation. Right. And so we need to be honest, but this is also what a good breeder will do. And there's so many shitty breeders that are backyard breeders that need to not sell these dogs on Facebook that realize, hey, like there's a lot that goes into this. I started breeding dogs and that's where I realized, hey, you guys are getting fixed because I'm done. Right. I don't want to give away or or place dogs that I'm not 100% sure about. But you better believe, Colleen, I know every single one of my dogs, where they're at right now. I can call the family, check in on them. In fact, one just came over yesterday, and I'm in contact with every single one of my dogs' families. And that's what a good breeder, I would hope, does. And I always had a clause: I don't care what happens in your life. We never can tell the future, but if you ever need to rehome this dog, bring him back to me. I will be happy to take him back at any time in their life.
I
Right?
know what you were talking, you wanted to address that people don't know what good dog breeding is. I think that's a really important point.
Yeah, I mean, good dog breeding is like qualifying and labeling, and just really, really taking the time to ensure that you're getting a good stock, and standards, right? It's such a, just a, and the breed that you are doing, right, and being responsible, and having healthy, happy puppies, and um, there's just so much to this. Like, people just think, oh, I like this dog, right, and so they want to make more of them, and
Right.
it's not, that's not how it works.
Right.
It's like, um, this dog has potential. This dog is a solid dog. This dog is temperamentally tested, that is sound. And there's so many ways that we can qualify those dogs, but it's also, it takes time,
Yes.
and it takes these dogs to grow up, and it takes the dogs to become adults, and so we know what they're capable of as they get older, and as they get out of adolescence, and even during adolescence. It takes right imprinting.
Mhm.
It takes a right qualification, just like I was talking about earlier on the live stream, when we have a group of puppies there and we drop a pan, and we're watching which puppies run away, which puppies stay still and like kind of deal with it, which puppies are running towards the pan sniffing it, right? That tells us a lot about these individual dogs.
It's
And just
interesting.
because they're the same breed, and just because they come from, they're the same gender, a lot of them, we got 2 females and like 6 males or something, they're all individual dogs,
Mhm.
right? And so there's so many dynamics that go into this, and respecting the lineage that brought us to
Right.
the day that we see now. And I think that is a solution, as far as, this is really, really ensuring and making sure that you're a good breeder, but also that you find a good breeder and support them.
Right.
And sometimes these rescues are there. I don't work with rescues anymore because of so many instances that I've had with dangerous dogs that I said, this dog needs to be euthanized, and they went and rehomed it.
Yeah.
And I can't do that anymore. It just kind of lays like emotional and energetic residue in my brain, that I'm always worried about this dog out there hearing that she's going to attack somebody. And I've signed off on it because of that. So what are some of the solutions that you think are maybe possible, or that you see on the horizon? Or, you said that the bite disclosure laws, right?
Those are a really big deal where there's a case in Los Angeles. So Los Angeles animal shelter is being sued for $23 million because they adopted out a dog with a bite history, did not tell, the law was in place, so they did not disclose the previous bite, and it was pretty serious bite. And then it mauled someone in that home, and she has a full amputation. So that is they just won a ruling. A judge said, yes, you can sue the city. So in order to sue a city, you often have to go through a whole court system just to do that in and of its own, to get the right to sue. So they have the right to sue. And I think what that case will show is that, there's a lot of issues about sovereign immunity and suing government bodies and things like that. But when they break the law, in the case in Los Angeles County, they broke the law. They did not disclose the bite history. that places them more on the hook. So I think if we can see that, at least the attorney who's bringing that case, Ken Phillips, he seems to think that that case may cause the adoption of similar laws in more states, and because it's a legal liability issue, and we certainly would like to. Oh yes, and this was so just before this ruling, Los Angeles had lost another. They exactly 7 million. And so the 20 million case hasn't been heard yet. It hasn't been sent to a jury yet. And we don't know if it will. They might settle or something. But yeah, so these, and they are long time no kill. And we see all these dangerous dogs languishing in the shelter. I'm talking about LA City, not LA County. In this case, both of these cases are about LA City shelter. So we'd really like to see the adoption of those laws just across the board in as many states as possible. I think that, yeah, we're going to start running into this whole idea of, I don't know how the public has learned to like hate shelters that put dogs down. And, and we can only hope that people will begin to wise up a little bit about behavioral euthanasia, and when it's too much, and when it's time for you to make a decision about your dog, and not like surrender it someplace and have someone else make that decision, right?
Yeah,
I think that and so it's hard, and legally I don't know sort of the direction, but one thing that I would like to see in every state too, or even just one state to start off with, is that to require insurance for all dog owners. That way victims could be compensated, and because that's a real problem right now, and just get them all insured. I mean, we have lots of protocols in place for that. People with small dogs wouldn't be paying very much at all. Even people with large dogs wouldn't be paying very much at all. So it's not expensive unless your dog's a biter. Then you're going to have a problem insuring it, or it's going to be expensive.
Well, and it's the homeowners already are not insuring certain breeds, right?
That's right. So I guess I would say that, if this was a law, say like passed a state law, you'd have to address that and figure that out, that, every dog owner must be able to have some type of affordable, or, as long as it's not a, previous biter, some type of affordable insurance, and that would be worked out on some type of state level. But I think that would be the future. I mean, we have insurance for so many things already, and bites, medical care just keeps going up and up, and so these bites are expensive. Even when you said it can become really expensive when you get if it gets infected, because then you're really on a drip for 3 or 4 days. And hospital time. That's a long time. So yeah, I mean, I'd like to see that, and maybe just a shift. It's hard to say where the pendulum has shifted so far into, treating these dogs like humans. I don't know how much further it can go, but apparently it's going to go. Keep going.
Yeah.
It was only a generation ago when my parents did not. Their dog was outside, and they were inside dogs, but they lived outside, and they came in and hung out with us when we watched TV. But now, I mean, it's a whole different world, and it's just unclear where it's going to go. And generally, it's not your average dog owner that's causing these tensions. It's people that have aggressive dogs, unpredictable dogs, and they are the primary source of tension, because we don't want to get hurt. Right?
Well, and it's also the people that apologize, or apologists, or not apologists, but like they're blind supporters of these dogs, and the salacious attacks, just like you experienced when you first started this. And I mean, they're going to fuel the fire, man. They're going to make sure that this stuff happens to, that people stay in the game and stay invested in this, because it's, I mean, just like what happened with you, it kind of fueled your fire of starting this because of how you were attacked and salaciously in a salacious way, where it's like, and I've seen where people have been bit by their dogs and shamed for it, right? Or I don't know, it's incredible to see. It's such an
It's incredible
interesting
to see.
dynamic of these dogs with people. Sure, it sounds like a great idea. Here, let's see, but it would work with power breeds only, and then would become expensive. Yep. Well, maybe they need to be expensive. I don't know. I mean, maybe this might make them more of a premium. I don't know, but it's also, I tell people that the role of the dog has changed dramatically in the last 100 years. Right. And so
Yes.
we used to get these dogs for working breeds, and now they're kind of looking at dogs, right? They don't really have, did I tell you about the looking at towels at my grandma's house? Like my grandma.
Oh, wait.
So,
So tell me again. Okay.
yeah. My grandma, whenever I go wash my hands, she'd be like, use that towel in the back of the toilet. Don't use the looking at towels, because she had these towels that were all around the bathroom that were really nice. And that's what happens, is that they become looking at dogs. They don't, the function and the versatility that they were bred to perform, the action that they were bred to perform, are ignored.
Yeah.
And so it transmutes into different things, right? And so we also have sports that we can use with these dogs to help fulfill intrinsic desires that these animals have. But there's got to be something that we can do to fix this problem. And if you guys don't know, this is dogbite.org, and this is Colleen's website. And we've been chatting for over an hour now. Is there anything else that I haven't mentioned that you want to?
I think you addressed we addressed a lot of stuff, and story and sort of some things that are on my mind right now, some potential laws about moving forward, and I think what you've said too. The more you talk to your community of trainers, the more you talk to your clients and dog owners, that all helps tremendously. And there needs to be some pushback on the sector of no kill that has one measurement. That's the save rate. That's the only measurement they have, and that's what they sort of live and die by. And there's so many more measurements that could be developed, right? As far as, is it going to be safe and X, Y, and Z, or when it meets that dog down the street next week, right? So yeah. I think sort of, there's the what's it called? Compassionate sheltering. There's another sort of something that's this sort of creeping in. We'll see if the sheltering system sort of begins to sort of move away from that a little bit, or modifies it a little bit so it's not so extreme. That would be a very welcome shift. I think to victims and to the public, and I think it's gone far too in one direction with no kill.
Yeah, and it's an appeal to emotion, which is a logical fallacy, and that's what a lot of these no kill shelters are utilizing. And I'm more interested in the truth, and I think that the mandatory disclosure of dog bites is a huge one, right? If a dog bites, you should know about that. And in the temperament testing, we need to bring back solid universal temperament testing, where we actually have, where we put family. Oh, there's a temperament test that we were talking about that is bull. What is that? I want to mention that while we're still on. The fourth that where people scored fourth on the temperament test. I see the meme being shared around, especially after the XL.
ATTS, yeah.
ATTS, which is these guys, their temperament test for Schutzhund and for dog sports, for biting sports. They're not a temperament test for family dogs, and that's where I think we need a family temperament test. Like, is this dog going to be a good fit for your family with kids that are unpredictable, that are chaotic, and that's perfectly acceptable for that kid to be, because that's what they are. And how do we expose the dog to a potential where it's going to let us know if this dog can exist in this type of environment or not? And I think it's a service to the animal to make sure that they are going into the right environment, but it's also definitely a service to the family. and people are sharing this meme around like the pit bull is number 4th in this temperament test, and it's such a disconnect because this isn't the temperament test that we need. And
No.
so we need, but how do we include kids in temperament tests? Like, I know that we could do like a doll, or they do the hand on the stick,
Right.
right? And I guess that's going to be the closest thing if the dog goes after that doll. And also, I mean, how could we do like what do you call it, where a simulator, right? A simulator of a house, right?
Mhm.
Where we have a dog coming in and automatically a knock at the door or a package delivery or something like that, right? And then I'm giving the dog something of high value. The instances that people are getting bit, number 1 is when a dog's eating. Number 2 is when a dog is mouthing an object like a toy or a bone.
Mhm.
Number 3 is when a dog is sleeping, right? And so educating people about that. And then the dogs bite other dogs. First 2 are the same. When the dog is eating,
Mhm.
dog is mouthing an object, and the third one is affection. So when another dog is getting affection and the dog doesn't want that, or the dog is not done getting his affection and guarding the person from
Okay.
going to love up another dog, right? And so arming ourselves with the knowledge, but also putting dogs through these temperament tests where we put them through the scenarios that are most likely to incur a bite. That sounds to me like a solution, right? And then, but what happens when the dog fails?
Correct.
And what happens when the dog fails in a major way?
Major way.
Right. That's when the dog needs to be humanely euthanized, go to Jesus, and let the room that was meant for a dog that has those characteristics be filled by that dog.
Right. Right. I mean, that's just it. I've never understood how the allocation of resources can be so extreme to so few when there's so many dogs that don't have those issues. I've never understood it. I guess it's just emotional. Right?
It's 100% emotional. You know that people are 10 times more likely to act based on emotion than they are on pure logic. That's
Right.
why these Fortune 500 companies, they spend billions of dollars to get you to view their product in the emotional arena, right? But we unfortunately live in the emotional arena when we're working and dealing with dogs. And the whole rescue, who rescued who, I'm the savior. And it's like, work on yourself before you start turning this dog into an emotional dumping ground, right?
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, that's sort of
that's
intense that it is that way. That is intense.
yeah. Well, Colleen, thank you. If you want to stay here, and I'll say goodbye to you in the studio here, but I appreciate you, and I appreciate what you're doing, and I want to. Now, how do people donate to you? How do people?
There's a donate button, so it's right there on the top navigation, and you can just follow that link. And we use PayPal, so it'll send you a PayPal, and you just make a donation right there.
Beautiful. And then Barb says, before we go, when I grew up, my mom said, leave the dog alone while he's eating. Now people purposely stick their hands in bowls. I've never had a dog resource guard. People create it most of the time. Yeah, absolutely. You know, but it's also, some of them do have the potential more likely to do that resource guarding. But yeah, if you got somebody that's bugging that dog all the time and all of a sudden the dog's like, aha, all I did was look, or did a little bite or a growl or something, or growl like is A, then a snap is B, and then a bite is C, right? And so the dog learns on their own how to be successful with the growl, and eventually turns into a bite. But yeah, I agree. Like, let the dog eat, let the dog be himself, and like, it's just like if somebody was continually messing with you while you're eating. Now I can see.
Imagine that.
Well, I could see if like you need to grab a bone or something out of their mouth, or they got something that's dangerous, and that dog protesting you, and you correcting that dog and letting them know, don't do that shit, right? That's what people need to know, is like, and that's what my job is as a dog trainer, is to show them, hey, look, we don't punish this, we correct it. We show the dog that that's unacceptable in that time or right before that time, And so the dog has that understanding. But what happens with these dangerous dogs is that they don't take the correction. And especially with game breeds, fighting dogs, sometimes if you come at them too hard, they're coming right back at you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I've heard different stories from trainers, just death defying, like, oh, it didn't work on that dog.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You come too hard. And I've had dogs where I've been like, look, do not correct this dog until you get to know him and that dog trusts you. Otherwise, that dog is going to take that aggression that they have pointed forward, and it's we call it climb the line, where basically where you correct it and it climbs the line right up at you, redirects that aggression towards you, right? And so, and there's that. I mean, working dogs do that. All the many different types of dogs will do that, but that's why it's valuable to work with a professional that can see and give you the right guidance. So thank you, everybody. And Colleen, you stay there. We'll say goodbye. Bye, everybody. Check out dogsbite.org.